Hello, Brawlers. I was always in love with Alice. I love her design. I loved her demeanor. I think a lot of people like her because she turned out to be Masquerade, and that switch was really cool when we were little. And it felt so bad, firstly, that she lost her battle to New Destroyer. I've seen countless Reddit posts on this in which they're like, yeah, no, she should have won. Alpha Hydroid was nerfed, etc., etc. But the biggest pain for me was how in Mechtanium Surge 2, despite all of the main cast coming back, she didn't because she was stuck in Russia, and it just got me thinking, like, hey, how difficult would it be to actually have implemented her in Mechtanium Surge 2, just so that we could have the whole cast back together, right? Because that was kind of the big thing, right? How Mechtanium 1 and Mechtanium 2 were going back into the roots of the previous seasons. Mechtanium 1 reanalyzing Gundalia Nethia, and then Mechtanium 2 going back to New Destroyer and the Doom Dimension. So, especially with the Doom Dimension, this always felt like a missed opportunity. And so I took it upon myself to try to rewrite and see, hey, could I put her back into the story? And the answer was pretty simple. I set up one rule for myself for this rewrite, which was to not change the overarching story of Mechtanium 2. I bet there's a bunch of people in the comments who will talk about Mech 2 being their least favorite season, and here's why. So I just set out my goal that, like, I didn't want to do a full rewrite. I just wanted to just say how easy it was for Mira to have been Alice, and fans would have been so happy just to see her again, see her grow up, and have the confidence that was indicated in New Destroyer but was not really worked on. Frankly, saying that she was stuck in Russia just feels like a cop-out because she was able to use her teleport card to go into the city whenever she wanted. Just like how Mira comes back with her Vestal technology, we instead make this Vestal technology humanoid technology owned by Marucho, which, I mean, for him being so rich, nobody would think a second thought about this. Alice would be about 20 Mechtanium Surge 2, so I wanted her to be a university student who has come to Bakugan City to further analyze and share her findings on dimensional transport. Effectively, she is the protege of her grandpa, and now she is now able to teach and share her findings. And the reason why she would do that is for the exploration of the battle suits. So Marucho is the one who is creating the battle suits, not her. Although I know Spectra first introduced them to most of the cast, so I guess it's fair. Battlesuits are Vestal technology, but Marucho is designing his own ones. Alice has been called in the first episode, and she effectively replaces a lot of the scenes of Mira, in which she is the one working with Marucho on the Bakugan Research Center. Marucho is the one developing the suits, in case he ever wants to protect Bakugan City and other worlds in general, not just Earth. And then she is the one in charge of teleporting them. She will be the one in case he needs to interdimensionally transport them to, like, Nethia or Gundalia. So that's how it is on episode 27. Episode 28, Alice is the one who finds and records the readings of Dragonoid Destroyer. Alice is not familiar with it. She wasn't here during Mech 1 with the other Mechthagon. So I guess this episode is kind of weird. She should not be the primary one in charge of Dragonoid Destroyer, but we tackled this pretty quickly. Episode 29, Alice is the one to launch Doomtronic instead of Mira, and this is, you know, one of the first suits that Marucho is testing on a wide-scale use across the city, and it successfully works, which means that her transport system is working. The interesting part is episode 31, which is the Mira Marucho tag team. So instead, in episode 31, Marucho invites Mira to use the Vestal technology to design new suits. And then this episode plays exactly the same, pretty much. You know, she goes and hides, and then she brings out Roxtor, and then Roxtor and Radizen fuse. The whole episode mostly stays the same. Episode 32, Mira Faints. This is the same. And she calls Runo, that's the same. Alice is only here for transport, so Mira teaches Runo about the usage of the systems. Essentially, there's two parts. Alice is the one in charge of transport, and Mira is the one in charge of designing. I think Mira is definitely the best one to be in charge of everything, like how the show portrayed it, but this is just that way I can fit Alice in. Episode 34 stays the same. Gunz goes in and steals the suits from studying Runo and Kato. Episode 35, Mira recovers. and she increases the security and the defenses of what's left. But here, I'm gonna have Mira return home. So Alice has been very on and off in these episodes, and it's mostly just because, like, I can't deny Mira being a scientist and designing the suits. But let's face it, I do like that Mira is only here for like 4 episodes. A lot of these roles could really be shuffled around to like the other girls, and it mostly wouldn't change that much. But she's gonna leave Roxtor with Marucho, and then she's gonna leave all of the battle suits, designs, and statistics with Runo, making Runo her protege. And then in episode 37, when they have that night talk with the boys, I really like that this would instead set up Shun Alice instead of Shun Mira. I didn't really think there was much of like a connection there. She was indeed kind of like the mother, the mature one of the group, but Alice was also a very mature one back in Battle Brawlers. And I really liked how this would set up kind of like the Shu Alice ship just a little bit, because although I completely agree with people, I found like Klaus was kind of like a better ship for her. I do just want to like throw that bone out for them, because it really makes people feel like, wow, Mech 2 really brought back the original cast. I think that weight is increased when it's Shun Alice. Now, here's the part that I really want. I really wanted to not just shoehorn Alice here and just replace Mira. I wanted Alice to come in and have a reason for being here, right? Like how Runo had her episode with Aragon, and how Julie had her episode with Damdos. I wanted Alice to have an episode, and so I'm calling this effectively episode 42.5, where I would squeeze in 1 episode into the plot. This will revolve around Alice and Leonidas from the video game, because I think this would have been a perfect callback. And this would be entirely centered around the Doom Dimension. So, Wharton returns saying that he doesn't want to battle Mechtanium Destroyer, and he goes into the Doom Dimension. However, he's going farther and farther than what he had previously gone before, you know, the deepest end of the Doom Dimension. And Omega Leonidas is in the city with the protagonist. I would just call him the protagonist. And he hears Wharton falling and crying for help because he is lost in this tunnel through the Doom Dimension. And he tells the protagonist to go search for Alice, because Alice, this is after the events of the video game, and they know that Alice was Masquerade. So the two of them rush into the Bakugan Research Center, and they find Alice and ask for her help in the Doom Dimension, because she still has her field open transporter card. And she's also an expert in interdimensional transport. Mechtanium Destroyer arrives and he comes to blow up the city, so out of no other choice, Alice uses her activator card to transport them into the Doom Dimension. Now, we never see her use the Doom Dimension ever later episodes. I think she used it once for Vestal, but she mostly uses it within Earth. It kind of brings up a lot of questions about what are the limits of the field open transport card, but just for sakes, she's able to transport them back to the Doom Dimension. Alice, during this time, has gotten over a lot of her trauma from New Destroyer, because this was frankly a big pain point I had with New Destroyer. I am using these suits not as weapons, but as protection, right? She will resort to violence when she needs to, even though she doesn't like brawling. We can still keep that part of her character, in which she doesn't want to brawl, and that's why she's in the back lines, but she has other ways of helping out her friends. So in the Doom Dimension, they are walking, trying to find where Wharton is, because Omega still hears Wharton, and Alice, being in the Doom Dimension, hears the vengeance of the past souls, the past Bakugan statues that she had sent into the Doom Dimension. And these spirits are so enraged because they know that she's Alice, and they tempt her and they're yelling at her, and she can only hear it telepathically. The protagonist and Omega Leonidas can't. Then the souls start breaking and start attacking them, whether it's souls or fossilized Bakugan, I'm not sure which one. And this would be a huge callback to Battle Brawlers, so we're seeing like Santopoid, Siege, Mantris coming in and attacking them. And so protagonist throws Omega Leonidas and starts using their moves to, you know, protect them. And Alice gets all of these flashbacks all at once about she still hasn't paid back her debt. she still feels regret for what she did. So it's really in her face, the trauma of her past crimes. What's cool here is that the protagonist tells her that if it wasn't for her, he would have never met Omega, because Leonidas was born from the Doom Dimension, in particular, all the souls that were getting fed there by Naga. So he thanks Alice for, despite it being a little bit twisted, they never would have bonded. So her destruction also created, and all of the things that Naga did eventually reunited Destroyer into New Destroyer, and he got an amazing partner Bakugan. So Alice feels better and thinks, wow, I was able to help someone even as my time as Masquerade. I indirectly helped someone, in this case, create Leonidas. And then I want to have the Silent Core resonate with her. So, if you didn't know, they don't bring back Masquerade after Battle Brawlers because that was his send-off, right? That was it. So I don't want this episode to be an episode in which Masquerade comes back and she's rolling Alpha Hydronoid, but something very similar to that is something that I could easily do, because we see Alpha Hydronoid is a New Destroyer going up against Mechtanium Destroyer. The Silent Core resonates with her, and it wraps around her whatever residual pieces of the Silent Core in the New Dimension, they resonate with her, and it forms a shadow of Masquerade. So it's still her, but you see the silhouette, and instead she sets down her transporter card, and this becomes the current of time that catches Wharton. So that little spiral thing that Wharton references in episodes 43, I really hated how he just falls in by chance, and then he sees Ballista, and then he falls out of it. It was not a MacGuffin, but I feel like this is a much smoother way in which her transporter card evolves from being able to transcend dimensions to be able to transcend time. So the current of time wraps around and is able to catch Wharton. And at the same time, this current of time opens up after images of her old Darkus Bakugan, in which she uses her Bakumeter, because we don't have a gauntlet anymore. She uses her Bakumeter to play ability cards and use this Mantras, this Darkus Mantras, Darkus Siege, and Darkus Alpha Hydronoid after image. So it's not actually Alpha Hydronoid, but the current of time has brought back old Bakugan that she used to defeat all of the spirits. Then the current of time closes, the silhouette dissipates, so now we're back to regular Alice, and then the transporter card breaks. And after they talk, hey, what happened? Oh, Mechtanium Destroyer came in and was just about to blow us up, right? Catch him up on what's going on Earth. He then deduces that the current of time might be necessary to save the city and stop Mechtanium. So Omega Leonidas actually becomes willing to sacrifice himself to reopen the current of time, to transport them back into the past to save Bakugan City. And of course, he and protagonist get this really emotional talk about, you don't have to do this, and it's like, I was born in the Doom Dimension, I never existed in the first place. This is the one way for me to protect the ones who do. Omega Leonidas merges with the Doom Dimension and creates the current of time for our heroes to use later. At this time, I believe Dan and Gunz finish their battle, and then Alice is surprisingly able to pick up their coordinates on her meter and be like, what do you mean there's somebody here in the dark, deepest part of the Doom Dimension? So Alice tells them the coordinates and tell them, hey, come over here to the bright light that just appeared in the middle of the sky, being the current of time. And then the whole cast reunites, they update each other. I never liked how Wharton just gets this feeling of like, oh, I think Mechtanium Destroyer just silenced 1,000 souls. I think this would be a lot cooler to say Alice and protagonist saw Mechtanium Destroyer blowing up the city and have them tell them. So they all travel back together on the current of time. But during the shakes, Alice and the protagonist are shaken off, and Wharton goes backwards to save them and transport them back to the correct point of time, and then Betatron is the one who transports the other 6 to the correct point in time. So they are back in the tower, and then Alice calls Runo to grab the battle suits because Mechtanium Destroyer is going to go destroy the city, so she wants both of them back for the final fight. The most of the final fight plays out exactly the same, and instead we get Alice at the very last episode with them at the little celebration instead of Mira. I like this so much better, and we get an episode in which it is completely dedicated to Alice and her time in the Doom Dimension. I didn't like using the same vein as New Destroyer, but I liked the idea because the shadows are right in front of her face, right? She can see all of these old Bakugan statues. And now we have kind of a big resolution in which she did something big. Because the outcome didn't matter. Whether or not Shadow won or lost, Alice was still going to report back that, hey, Shadow attacked Earth. Like, that episode really did not pay off what it should have done. So I like this, where we can get the residual old Bakugan in which she's willing to fight for herself and overcome all of her past traumas. And then this also closes the protagonist, so this also makes him canon, because I'm not quite sure what is the theory on canon for the video games and the main anime. But so many people love Leonidas, and I'm sure they would love to see him on the actual screen, right? It would be a perfect wrap-up episode for Alice and give her a purpose to be there. And this would bring back the original 6 cast together without it conflicting with anything in the main story. Anyhow, this was just like a little passion project that I made because I really loved Alice as a character. Feel free to talk about it in the comments, and I'll catch you guys next time.